Hi, my name is Min Mather, Beck and Keenan's number one intern and producer of the Top to Bottom podcast. Usually, we start this podcast with Keenan's giving a question or asking a question to Beck, but today is my turn. So, Beck, here's my question for you today. What did we get Keenan for Christmas?
We got him a star, and we named it Keenan.
A star?
An actual,
like a real star. A real star.
Yes, sir.
That's the coolest thing in the entire planet. Oh, no pun intended. It's outside of this planet.
Outside this planet.
You're the
Oh my
North.
God.
When it comes to sales, you're the North Star.
Yeah, oh my God.
You're the North
Wait,
Star.
doesn't that say it on the page?
So here's locations, and it's Keenan with a period. We put Keenan with a period, and there's its location, there's its coordinates.
Wow. So wait, I'm looking at it. I'm trying to see if I know any of those constellations around it. So I don't. But that's all right. I'll find it. I'll find that sucker.
So here's your certificate. It's the North Star. It's Keenan, the North Star of sales.
Yes, and we will be giving you the actual certificate whenever it comes into the mail.
Thank you very much, you guys. This is so special. I feel so good inside. I got a star named after me now.
Get a star.
Now there's two stars in my life, me and the star.
Keenan, it's Keenan, period. We put the little period after it, too.
I saw that. I'm not quite sure why, but that's okay. I'll
Because
roll
you're
with it.
LinkedIn.
Well, you know they make me do that, right?
I know, but it's your LinkedIn is Keenan, period.
Okay. All right.
Well, hey.
There you go. Thank you very much, guys. That was very, very, very thoughtful.
Merry
Very thoughtful.
Christmas, Keenan.
Of course.
Thank you.
Now, with that out of the way, we are on to our first segment, which is
Email Teardown.
This is the segment where we tear down emails and messages that were sent to Beck and Keenan. So on to the first one. This email was directed to Keenan, and it says, "Hi, Keenan. Blank here. I love how a sales growth helps provide a complete set of sales management to improve the scope of buying people getting into the company. I think you definitely are the best tool to boost sales. We help SaaS companies generate 3,000% more content than their competitors with longer and superior quality content for just a tiny fraction of the price it would cost you to hire a team of full-time employees. All this content you can share on as many platforms as you want to attract clients all the time. One of our clients, Ringy, just closed 17,000 extra MRR thanks to our hyper content strategy. We have some ideas for a sales growth. Can we share this with you over a quick call, Keenan? Guarantee it's worth your time. Best blank." Keenan, what do you think about this email?
Oh my God. I sent this to you because I was so confused from the second it started. It started with some management piece, which I had no idea what they were talking about. So I was completely lost. And what was the subject line again? Do we know the subject line?
Keenan, quick question is the subject line.
So the subject line is a 0, like quick question, whatever. And then they tried to make some relevancy by talking about I'm a manager and I'm management this and management that. I didn't understand what they were doing there. Then 17K, there's nothing intriguing about that. 17K MRR, really, like that's all you got? Like, so there was just so little value in the entire thing, and it was confusing, and the offer to ask was a joke. Like, and back to Beck's point, if you got something for me, how about share it with me? So the whole thing was a dud.
What about you, Beck? What tips do you have for this email?
Yeah, so there's a number of different tips, but I like to double click on basically what Keenan said. But the first broadcast to me that they don't know you at all is they say a sales growth help provides a complete set of sales management. That I'm like, it's not even a noun.
I don't even know what it is.
Sales management, what? To improve the scope of buying people getting into the company. So like to me, that like phrasing things like that, there's a certain amount of vocabulary that you would know if you knew someone's industry. You would know to call it a prospect, prospective buyer, potential buyer, like pipeline creation. Like you would use some set of terms. And I know that this person was after like, okay, I want to broadcast him that I know him, but it actually for me broadcasted the complete like opposite message of like to improve the scope of buying people getting into the company. That I'm like, so from a high level, most of my tips here, are like around that of like, I didn't think the sentences were really readable. I didn't understand them if they were readable. And I certainly didn't understand what they did, what they do, what problem they solve for. But the last one is it says, guarantee it's worth your time. And I'm like, this email hasn't been. So why would I think that it's worth my time in the back end? That's it.
Okay, on to our next email or next message. This one was sent to Beck, and it says, hire top rated talent from blank, immediate available. Hi, Beck. Greetings from blank, this company. We provide on-demand developers, engineers, consultants, QA engineers within a week of interviews who can be deployed to projects immediately. We work on an offshore full remote model. We have our associations with 50 plus IT/ITES SMEs, which are reputed and growing firms, and 150 plus active tech resources pool with us who are immediately available for deployment with 100% surety. Keenan, why don't you go first on this one?
I went first and last one, but that's okay. I don't even. First off, if they understood that Beck was a solopreneur and a company of one, she doesn't need an entire sales stack organization. They make no reference to how or where they help. So they maybe are you any current application projects underway? If so, are they late? Are you struggling to get them deployed? Like they didn't touch on any problems that someone could be having. They obviously don't know who she is. I mean, I could go on and on.
Beck, what about you? What tips do you have for this message?
Yeah, I'd say by and large, 24 seconds. By and large, I don't know what they do. I also will say north of 80% of emails have a formatting error. This one included. The word provide should be lowercase. So I would pay attention to formatting errors and grammar mistakes, square one.
Wow, you kept it super short, Beck.
Watching that clock.
Well, on to our next section, which is
Sales mythology.
This is the segment where we demystify common myths within the sales industry. So our first sales myth is I should only focus on my biggest customers. Keenan, what do you think about this?
Ooh, man, I'm going first a lot today. What do I think about it? I think it's dumb, right? I think targeting your biggest customers and elevating them simply because your biggest customers doesn't make a lot of sense. Now, are we talking about from an opportunity perspective in the sales pipeline, or are we talking after they become customers?
I would think probably through the sales funnel, not after. After.
So no. So after is a slightly different story, but in the sales funnel, this is a no-brainer. You target those who have the biggest problem that you can solve, whether that's a small company or a big company. Literally, what we built here at ASG is we built an opportunity score. Think about that. I have yet seen anybody build an opportunity score. I see people have forecasting, 20% close, 30% close. But no, we built an opportunity score based on the size of the problem they're dealing with, based on the impact it's having on them, and based on the probability that they need to change or should change, regardless of who they go with. Those are the ones you focus on first because they have the highest probability of change, and therefore the highest probability that they'll buy from you or somebody. And just to leave it at this, we just dropped in some reporting, and what we found is we have a 100% close rate on anybody who has an opportunity score that's 75% or higher. 100%. And then it's like I think it's like 60% that's yellow, and then it's only like 11% if it's red. So those opportunity scores matter. So focus on those, and I'll talk another day on how we build our opportunity scores.
What about you, Beck? What do you think?
Yeah, well, I think kind of to Keenan's point, a double click of it is people want to they try to identify their customers based on an overt indicator of how likely could you how big would this sale hypothetically be? So I see every single company within SaaS, specifically if they're a mid-market company, they all tell me that they're trying to go enterprise. Enterprise, 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 enterprise. And it's not because they believe that I've never heard the justification of, well, we want to target enterprise because we believe that enterprise struggles with this problem that a mid-market company doesn't. And that's why we're evaluating them, like want to sell into them. They say, oh, well, enterprise is just a bigger company, so they could buy more. And I'm like, to Keenan's point, they're going to buy more or more readily whenever they understand that the problem is egregious and that it's worth solving. So that's not necessarily, going to come down to the size of the sale. The other thing that I would say, and then we can talk about post-close. The other thing that I would say is how enterprise buys specifically. I think it's a misunderstanding of early on sales reps that they think like, oh, this is a big company, so it's going to be a big sale. It's like, well, put that aside for a second. Typically, enterprise customers are going to buy, if it's SaaS in specific, they're going to buy like 20 seats, 30 seats as a pilot to see if it works before they roll it out to the entire organization. So it's going to be a longer tail sale. And when you're cross-selling across departments, it's like a whole new sale. Sometimes people say, oh, it's because we want to position it as a really shiny logo. And I'm like, usually enterprise logos are going to be extremely picky about who they let represent them, on the market. So I never see that actually shaking out. Usually, like from a low-hanging fruit perspective, it's going to be upper mid-market that I see is going to be they also introduce a long procurement process, a long legal process, tons of terms. So I think that the view, and we can talk about post-sale, Keenan, if you want to dig into that, but I think the view is like, oh, well, that's going to be a really quick, big whale if I rein it in. And I see the opposite experience whenever, I've seen people sell into them in the past.
Keenan, would you like to talk about post-sale, or would you like to go to the next sales mythology?
No, because I think post-sale is more marketing. I think it's more customer success. I think it's more a whole bunch of other things that I don't think are really germane. And we have other good topics. I mean, if Becc wants to, I will. But for our listeners, I don't know that that's something they can control.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, then in that case, our next sales myth for today is you should always challenge people's reasons for wanting to buy. Becc, why don't you start us off on this one?
I believe that it's the reason I think that's a myth. Why don't I start there? Is I think people have the misconception that you can bend someone's opinions on what they desire, and that the way that you do that is you try to influence their psychology and get them to believe something. The faster way, the difference between a fact and a reason is a piece of data that people are using as a fundamental truth to do something or not do something, right? And a fact is just standalone all by itself. So the faster way to me, if you think that someone's making the wrong decision, is to challenge the assumption that they have that's feeding into that agenda of I should do this thing. So I'll give you an example. If someone says like, oh, the reason that I want to buy is, our reps are sending messages at 4 p.m. right now, and I need a way to get them to send messages earlier in the day. So this clock software will essentially get people, to send messages at 8, 9, and 10 a.m. I can't challenge the person's reason so much of wanting to buy the software. What I can do is challenge the fact that actually it's the best time to send messaging at 2, 3, and 4 o'clock in the afternoon versus 8, 9, and 10. So they're building their thesis and their line of thinking based off of a fact that's actually incorrect. So how you can challenge them, I believe, at the base and the cathexis of it is that you challenge the fact, the misassumption that they have that's feeding into their mindset that they should or shouldn't do something. And that's the faster and from a psychology view, cleaner way to get that done.
What about you, Keenan? What do you think about this sales myth?
Always challenge somebody?
You should always challenge people's reasons for wanting to buy.
You should never always do anything, for starters. Mm-hmm. But you don't challenge people for the sake of challenging. Challenging should be rooted in positive intent. That's what it should be like. So you challenge somebody if you feel that the decision they're making or the decision making or the action they're about to take is not consistent with what they shared with you as their desired outcome. What they shared with you is what they're looking to accomplish, right? Or what they shared with you is in line with what the problems they're having today. So if someone, like we literally had someone the other day, a client that wants me to do something, and I found out what their problem was and their perception and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, I don't think that's a good idea. I do this. Not because I don't want your money, not because I don't think I can get it done. It's I don't think that what you're asking me to do, i.e. what you're buying from my company is going to solve your problem. So I'm not challenging them for the sake of challenging them. What I'm saying is I don't think this is the best result for you, and my intentions are good. I'll walk away from that sale, and I know my competition will fill it like a vacuum. But that's fine, because I'll remember when they spend this money and they don't get the outcomes they'll look like, wow, Keenan told us this wasn't a good idea. We didn't listen to him. We spent the money anyways, and we didn't get anything for it. So, yes, it's all about intention. You challenge when your intention is good, and it makes a difference for them.
I have an example. This is going to be probably an awkward example for people on the line, but I have an example of this. I've mentioned it quite a bit, but my sister is an ER doctor. And when I was home a couple weeks ago, I said, hey, so I think I have stomach ulcers. And she goes, okay. And I saw her brain shift. She's like, okay, it's time to diagnose. So she starts asking me different questions, like describe the pain. Where's the pain? How long's the pain been going on? And I said, and she said it can be one of two things. It actually can be stomach ulcers or it could be gallstones, one of the two. And as she asked questions, I said, well, I think that it's stomach ulcers, and I think that what's causing it is stress. And how she blew up that myth for me was she didn't say, no, I don't think it's stress, or, I actually think that it's the amount of coffee that you're drinking. She said, actually, there's no medical studies that can link stress to stomach ulcers. And so based on that fact, she didn't correct my reason for thinking that it was stomach ulcers or the reasons that I would want to buy some kind of medicine, that would be around stomach ulcers. What she challenged was the actual fact itself of how I was drawing the assumption. So I think that's a faster way to get it done. And they went away, by the way, for anyone who's worried.
Oh, so it's psychological on top of it all.
I start counting the amount of sirens before I cut it off.
That siren has given me stomach ulcers.
There's no study that suggests that sirens give stomach ulcers.
It's Keenan too.
Well, there's tons of evidence that suggests I do.
I agree. There's some lagging indicators.
Well, we're on to our next section of this podcast, which is
Take it or leave it.
This is the segment where I introduce common sales tactics, and Keenan and Becc let us know whether they would take it or leave it. The first one today is when your prospect asks you a question, you should give an answer right away. Becc, take it or leave it.
Leave it. I think you should always counter with a question. So there's going to be a myriad of different questions behind it. But if someone asks me a question, it's because they're limiting down they never are asking the actual question. And so a lot of times they're not asking the right question. So I want to counter with a question to understand the background. So I'm going to leave it.
What about you, Keenan? Take it or leave it?
I got to pull a Becc here. I haven't done too many of these.
It's
a TVIT. And yeah, I know. But I gotta treat my people right. I can't send them down the wrong road. And it always and it never and all that always makes me uncomfortable, right? But anyways, it depends. If they ask you a question and you don't understand the motive behind the question, or you're not understanding what they're actually trying to get to, ask a question for clarity. But if they ask you a question that's really clear and simple, and asking them another question on top of that looks evasive, and you don't ever want to look evasive. So if it's a very clear question that the context is clear and the question is very expected, then answer it. Like don't play games with, well, let me ask a question. But if it's not, and you want clarity, you understand the motivation, then ask a question. So it just depends.
So what if the question is, what's your price?
Well, again, Context matters.
It's
If
definitive.
they just
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
the question is definitive, but the context not.
Mm-hmm.
If they just call me up and they're like and they're like, hey, Keenan or Christian or whatever, we're just shopping around. Can you tell us roughly what your sales? No, I'm going to ask a question. Tell me what you're trying to do. I'm not going to answer it. Right. However, if we just done an entire, which happened the other day, did a full discovery, laid it all out, blah blah blah. They love it, problem, and they're like, all right, just so we understand, what's the price? I'm going to tell them because I now know roughly what I'm going to recommend to them. So context matters every time.
There's also a rule, general rule of thumb, just for anyone listening, that if someone asks the same question twice, you should answer it dead on. Statistically, you're more likely to make the sale. Like if I say, Keenan, what time is it? And he's like, well, that depends on why you're asking. And I'm like, what time is it? You're like 3:00. You should answer it dead on, that you're more likely at that point, because to your point, they're communicating that they think that you're being evasive at that point.
Yes, but here, okay, we're going to miss another one. But again, in sales, I am being evasive sometimes. And if they do that, I'm not going to answer. So if you ask me price and I'm like, well, what's going on? Tell me, I want to know the price. I'm not going to fold then, right? Context matters. I don't care how many fucking times you ask. I don't want your business. This is what salespeople need to understand. It may seem to be my rant. Fucking stop trying to win every fucking piece of business. Okay? Stop. Just stop. And if someone's going to be that belligerent when you're trying to help them, then fuck them. I'm not going to answer. Well, then I'm going to go to someone else. Good. Here's the name of my competitor. Let you be their problem.
All right, on to our next one, which is SDRs and AEs going to conferences. Keenan, take it or leave it.
Yeah, take it. Look, obviously there's all kinds of things that come into play. Can you afford it? Is the budget? What's the conference? But generally speaking, absolutely take it. They do just as good a job as an AE in that booth, maybe even better, because they're the ones on the phone all day getting rejection. They're used to calling people up. They're used to the uncomfortable pause, the conversations. Absolutely get their asses in the booth and go to the conference. 100%.
What about you, Beck? Take it or leave it?
I'm a take it if they do research beforehand on who's going to be there, and they do outreach beforehand to make it worth it. I'm a leave it if they don't. I'd say have a marketer do it.
Okay, and our last one is using your AE customers to fuel numbers for your events. Beck, take it or leave it.
Hard leave it. Because
I don't even understand the question.
So, meaning, believe what it means is like basically, if to fuel the number of attendees, I'm a leave it if that's the goal, because then what's left afterwards, marketing is like, we crushed this list, and it's like, yeah, but it's all people that I drove and their previous customers, so it doesn't help with MQL number.
What about you, Keenan? Take it or leave it. You have 5 seconds.
I don't even understand it. I don't even understand it.
All right, perfect. Well, in that case. Okay, on to the next segment, my personal favorite segment, which is
The inbox.
Yeah. Ah, yes. I get to take out the trusty mailbox. So the first message from today is from Rebecca Bride from Australia. She asks, how do you accurately determine when an MQL is ready to enter the sales funnel? Is there a better way of figuring that out other than traditional lead scoring? Keenan, why don't you start us off with this one?
MQL, so it comes from marketing.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. That is a deep one. I almost want to push this off to Beck. Oof. Man. Other than lead scoring?
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's what.
So this is how I'm going to answer this question, because this is deep, and this one is really deep. I don't really think there's, from an MQL, not an SQL, an MQL, I don't think there's a silver bullet. I think you really need to zero in on the criteria of the MQL. So in other words, what criteria are you using? So for me, it would be things like the probability that a problem exists, and I want to know exactly what problem is and why do you think that problem exists. Now, that could come from the fact they downloaded a certain piece of white paper that talks about a very specific problem, right? They may have actually been to our website and read about that particular problem. Now, your organization has to be set up to do that. Ours is, but maybe yours isn't. So to me, you got to create problem-centric behaviors or MQL scoring so that the sales team can ascertain does this company potentially have the problem or problems that we solve, and we can start the problem discussion fairly quickly.
What about you, Beck? What do you think?
My biggest advice would be, or one of the things I see damaging companies is lead scoring. Oddly enough, is they have a certain amount of triggers that once the person downloads, 4 pieces of content, they'll get a certain amount of points for a right level of title, for the right size of company, for the amount of pieces of content they downloaded. Sometimes people even include demo requests in there. So like hypothetically, you'd request a demo and you'd have to download several more pieces of content to actually be sent to the inbound team. Point being, my core belief around it is set the bar wherever you want to set the bar of like, whether that's level of title, whether that's, to Keenan's point, like several criteria that you believe a problem is likely to exist. And then once they take any kind of what I would call a postbound action, non-hand raising marketing action, whether that be they attended a webinar, they attended an event, in real time, gate them over to the SDR. So it's like if a VP of sales, SVP of sales accidentally sneezes in my direction accidentally, I'm like, awesome, I'm in. So my biggest piece of advice would be set the bar wherever you want to, in terms of like the level of title that you want to talk to. And then on like last touch attribution and one touch attribution in real time, sequence them over to the SDRs to follow up with them with a meaningful message. Great question.
Okay, on to the next question, which comes from Larry Burns from Michigan. He asks, how do you deal with interpersonal conflict within your sales department? As is it even any of my business as a sales leader to get involved in the first place? Beck, why don't you start off?
That's a deep one.
We're getting the deep questions.
I would want to understand from a high level, and it depends on who's fighting and what they're fighting about. But from a high level, do they have a history of kind of picking fights with other people? And is the fight about actual business, or is it about something else? Like, is there any kind of, I don't know, emotional agenda as a part of it? And I would weigh that into my consideration.
What about you, Keenan? What do you think about this?
Look, if there's an interpersonal conflict that has elevated itself to the point that I'm aware of it, that's a problem. That's a big problem. So the rest of it just depends on what it's about and why it's been escalated, right? And then from there, the culture of the organization should dictate and guide it. But if you're having interpersonal relationships that are being elevated to the point where management's getting involved, 9 out of 10 times it's a cultural issue or it's an individual person issue.
All right, perfect. We're on to our next segment of this podcast, which is
the challenge.
This is the segment where Keenan and Beck break down a challenging subject within the sales industry. And today's challenge is discovery fatigue, how to overcome it. Beck, why don't you start us off with this one?
Yeah, so I'd like to start off with maybe a definition. For those in line who don't know what it is or haven't come into it, discovery fatigue, from my view, is when you can feel your prospect getting annoyed, like they're sick of being asked questions. So I think the root of it and the crux of it is every single time that you ask a question, you are either running the credit card, you're either depositing some money, or you're withdrawing some money. And most of the questions that I hear being asked are withdrawal questions, meaning the prospect gets no value from the question. So the prospect only gets value from a question if they knew something that they didn't know beforehand, or they're considering something in a different light that they weren't beforehand. Those are the 2 pieces of value that someone could get from a question. And so now there's some questions that you have to ask in the process of diagnosis. What type of sales engagement provider are you using? How many people are on your team? But I'm always thinking about, am I asking too many situational questions up front? Am I asking too many questions that are withdrawing from the bank account? The other kind of one that could withdraw is a question that shows that you have no credibility, that proves to the person that basically you don't know what you're talking about, that you're asking the wrong type of question from their perspective. So to start us off, I think that the general thesis behind it from my perspective is your prospects are going to get discovery fatigue if they're not getting anything from your questions. They aren't seeing anything in a different way. They don't know anything that they didn't know beforehand, or that they believe your questions are either leading them somewhere that they don't want to go, you're trying to close them, or they are proving that you have no credibility because of the wrong questions to be asking from their perspective by and large. Keenan, what do you think?
I think you're right. I think in addition, discovery fatigue is very real. And the reason it's very real, so we'll go to definitions, and it's probably just layering on top of what you said, is 90%, I'm just picking that number out of my ass, of salespeople's discovery is meant to try to sell. I have said this in my trainings a million times. I actually had someone go through the training, and I'm working with them on the retention packages on the back end. I had to have this conversation with again today. I said, why did you ask that question? Well, I wanted to see if we could fix it. I'm like, no. Your job is not to go find the problems and issues or do a discovery so that you can sell. Your job is to do a discovery that allows you to understand what is happening in the organization as it relates to the issues and problems and challenges they're having that you just so happen to be able to solve. So that's the first thing, is salespeople are just not going in with the right frame of mind. And so because of that, they're doing all the things that you just suggested they shouldn't do because their head's not in the right place.
It's the agenda. It's always the agenda. I notice at the beginning of my discoveries, some people, especially if they're, they don't have a long, history with my work, like they're just kind of net new and they were referred by someone, that their red flags are up in the beginning. They don't want to answer that many questions in the beginning. And as I go on in discovery, they start opening up more and more and more information. And at the end, they want the call to go longer. We lose track of time all the time. So it's a litmus test to me that, like, along the way, do they trust me with information? Are they opening up to me at all? To your point, that, like, if not, they believe that they need to protect themselves against me because they see me as a salesperson. So I think it's about especially the questions up front.
So what people need to do once to address fatigue, you've got to take the first thing, you stop thinking about selling. That's the first thing. Second thing is you try to understand. The third thing, which is really hard for people, I don't blame them this. I blame people who try to sell. I blame them. But when you really lean in and you try to properly gap sell, which is the best discovery in the world, right, is you have to actually listen. There is only one question that really matters when you start, and that's the question that gets the flow going. But once the flow gets going, your ability to actively listen, not think about your next question, but actively listen and be processing the information they're giving you in a way that's allowing you to understand what's going on, so that the next question should only open the conversation even more. So if a customer says, oh, yeah, we're really struggling with producing more XYZ widgets, and the team's getting frustrated, and what they'll do is say, so we really need a product that does. That's what they'll do. We're having a hard time creating more widgets. We need a real product, a product that does this and does this. Does your product do that? Absolutely. But when you say that you're struggling with more widgets, could you walk me through that a little more and help me understand what's going on? Some will go verbose, some won't. But let's say the one who doesn't says, yeah, we're just not making enough. We need to make more. So when you say more, what are we talking here? Right? And goes, oh, we need 100,000 more. Where are you at today? Right? And here's where it gets really interesting. That seems interrogational. And then I say, well, we're only at 50,000 today. Then you say, 50,000, that seems fairly robust. could take a few minutes. Could you walk me through why 50,000 is not enough and what's going on in the organization? And just shut up. The key is letting the client talk, process what you're hearing, and ask a question that opens up the conversation in a broader sense so that everybody can understand what is going on here right now.
Something that I've done, kind of to your point, or that I've done to hinder that, is they'll say something, and maybe I'll be good about asking, and this was, I'm growing as I go, but they'll say something that excites me because I'm like, oh, well, this is the pain. Okay, they do have pain. And then I'll interrupt their flow. And I'll be like, oh, we have the perfect thing to do that. Or, oh, I was just talking to someone the other day about that. And I've noticed that even when they're like really valid or whatever, that I think, oh, this is a relevant case that I've just run into, it cuts the faucet off to a degree. And so I've tried to push myself of like, okay, they're telling me this piece of information, put aside for the fact that excites me because of whatever reason. What do I not know about the situation? And whenever you view the conversation in terms of all the things that you don't know versus the things that you do know, I've found that I'm on a almost like rat race in the conversation to find out all of the information that I can to help build an effective diagnosis. So it's like, okay, I have this marker, because I'm like, the number of things that you need to find out is what's the problem that they want to solve? Like hypothetically, what do they think is the root cause? Why do they think that? What do they think is a solution? Why do they think that? What do they think is the current or future impact? Why do they think that? What was the event that triggered them to want to buy? And then also, what do you think the core problem is? What do you think the root cause is? What do you think that the current impact is? What do you think the future impact is? What are the problems that they don't know about? What are the triggers that make the problem we're solving? And when you, in my experience, when that was the conversation that I was starting to have, like, meaning those are the, like, that's a lot of shat to find out in a conversation. And so I'm choosing my questions wisely enough to be able to knock out, hopefully, a couple at one time, so that I can like use my questions effectively, knowing I have to pull out of that information. When I started viewing it like that, it's like, I don't have time to tell them a story. I don't have time to tell them this like quip about why that makes me excited that they're in pain. So kind of your point, like that alleviates it for me. I'm going to pass it back to you. That's a long rant.
Look, the last thing I'll tell people to avoid discovery fatigue is that your job in discovery is not to sell anything. Everybody watch what I do here. That was for you, Beck. Your job in discovery is to come to a place in tandem, in collaboration with your buyer to determine if staying where they are is acceptable or not. That's your job in discovery. That's it. All the sales world, listen, all you fucking gurus too that think you know your shit, no one gets this point. Nobody. That's the point of discovery. Not to determine to buy your product, but to determine if that customer can stay there or not. Period.
For shame, men.
Hey, that was my gift to Keenan this week, No, it's gold.
I'm starting to see Beck's strategy here. She goes in these rants and leaves me like this much, so she knows that I'm going to get the buzzer. I figured it out now.
Keenan is under the impression.
She's like, all right, she's got to get the buzzer now.
Here's Keenan's misassumption. Keenan's always under the assumption, for everyone watching on LinkedIn, that I'm up to something. That's what he thinks in his head. Yeah, that's fair, right?
Yeah, but here's the best part. Beck is a genius. Beck does nothing by happenstance. Nothing. Look at her home. Look, she has 5 colored toothbrushes, people, 1 for each day. I don't know what she does on the weekend. So do not convince me or our listening audience, which we love to death, that Beck does anything by happenstance.
Okay, but like sometimes don't you think like I get tired sometimes you think like I might wake up and be like, oh, I don't want to put a plot together today or put a scene together.
No, I don't think that for a second. Because if you wake up, a plot has been devised. There we go.
Well, with that, we are on to our last segment of the podcast, which is the rants. This is the segment where Becc and Keenan give us their closing thoughts and share with us what's on their mind. So, Keenan, why don't you tell us your rant for today?
I didn't have a prepared one. And so
you can go on a rant about me.
No, I can't rant on you. I think like rather than a rant, I think I'd like my message to be stop attacking the person. Not just for the holidays, but in general. We have shifted in our society that we attach our belief systems or our frustrations to the person and not the behavior. So there should be this phrase, attack the behavior, not the person. So if someone's doing something you don't like or someone's has an opinion you don't like, attack the opinion, attack the behavior. Don't attack the person. Don't bring the person down. Don't drag the person down. The person's fine. Go after the behaviors. Go after the opinion. But let's just remember that we're all people. And what triggered this is the whole Brittany Griner thing. There's a whole bunch of fucking people out there who are all pissed off that we didn't bring this Whelan guy home. Okay? And so somehow now, don't worry about it, Becc. Somehow now, Brittany is a bad guy and the Wheeler's the good guy, or the Wheeler's the bad guy and Brittany's the good guy. How about the fact that they're two Americans who are in Russia in jail where they should be or shouldn't be isn't the point, and we want to get them home. We got one home. Okay? It doesn't mean that Brittany is better than him and he's worse than her, or it doesn't mean that he's better than her and she's worse than him. It doesn't, okay? Just fucking, we got to stop with this people attacking thing. So there's my message. Holiday or not, let's just remember we're all people and just cut it out.
All right. What about you, Becc? What is your rant for today?
Am I allowed to do no rant? I think his was good.
I didn't do one last week, remember? Because of your women one. That was a good one.
I think that one, I think that what Keenan said is great. I think it was great. I don't want to muddy it.
That's the end of our podcast.
All right. All right. Let me see. Next Wednesday, you knuckleheads, at 12 o'clock Mountain Standard Time. It'll be our last one before Christmas. I am not bringing any Christmas gifts, but I may bring some eggnog. So until then, I'm Keenan.
And I am Becc. See you next week.